Red State artists, they're creative, they're alive, they're very much real. Robby Starbuck is one of the best. He joins us now. I'm James Poulos. This is Zero Hour. Robby Starbuck, he's a Cuban-American anti-communist filmmaker. He's got a new movie out called The War on Children. Check it out. Welcome, Robby.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so let's get into this. The War on Children, that can mean lots of things, unfortunately. Kids taking it from all sides these days. What's the angle that you're taking, and what's the latest on that issue?
Yeah, we've been very blessed to have it become the most watched documentary of the year with over 50 million people watching it so far. And essentially, it's covering all the different angles that we see kids being attacked from today, from the over-sexualization, the way education has fallen apart, the over-medicalization of kids. And that comes in many different forms, from all of the psychotropics they're being put on to the gender madness we're seeing, where they're trying to transition children. And then you've got all the environmental factors that are coming in through foods, frankly, and none of them are natural, actually. We're looking at all of these hormone disruptors that are changing really the physiology of kids. And so there's all these different angles, and we wanted to put it all in one place so people could understand the problems, but also start to look at, how do we protect our kids? What do we do differently to stop this?
It really is out of control. And I'm old enough to remember when, in the 80s, it was all about helping the kids, saving the kids, make the world a better tomorrow for the kids. It was such a kid-centric culture, maybe in some ways even pushing a little bit toward like almost worshiping children and youth. It was so intense. And things have now, wound up in a much different place. I know that this is an example that's going to be somebody close to you as a former LA creative and still a creative guy. Just recently saw a clip of Francis Ford Coppola getting a question from a press conference where basically, he was sort of challenged a little bit on what he was trying to do with this latest movie of his, which has been a passion project, something he's been after for a very long time. He likes to take big swings, basically what he said was this is a film about trying to understand how to face up to the world we live in and make a better one for the children. And then he turned to his star Jon Voight, who was there, and he said, "John, you've got different opinions," and there's sort of laugh in the crowd. And Jon Voight went on to give, a very heartfelt set of remarks about how, this world is so messed up and how we all have to come together and figure out how to save it for the children. There's so many good intentions, so many people, it's still a bad look to say we should hurt the children, we should get rid of the children. But when you look at what we're actually doing to kids, do you think it's really just misplaced good intentions, genuinely more malevolent or out of control going on?
I think there's a mixture here. First is sort of the human misunderstanding of the value of good intentions. Good intentions don't really matter. Your intentions are really worthless. I'm glad if you have good intentions, but to be honest, all that matters is the end result of what you do. Your actions matter, and the result of your actions matters far more than your intentions. So we can throw intentions out the window. And when you look at the reality of what is going on in the world today, it's predominantly being poisoned by a far left ideology that has always failed, has always resulted in death, and has always resulted in destroying the lives of kids. That's what we're seeing, and it's not the first time in history. I will say that this isn't, something new under the sun. This is a repeat of history. And what we're doing is sort of an attempt to intervene and say, hey, we don't have to repeat the mistakes of history. We can stop this. We can keep this from going to an extraordinarily dangerous place. We just have to act like adults. And so I do think there is an evil component of this, and I think it's kind of undeniable at this point. I mean, I have friends who are not even religious. They consider themselves atheists and have come to believe there is a God because of how evil things have gotten, where they go, it's undeniable at this point that there's a war of good and evil. And so I think this is even driving people who lack faith to faith, because it's becoming so explicitly clear that there are battle lines here. One side is fighting for good, one is for evil. Is there some gray space? Yeah, there's some gray space, and generally that's where cowards fall. But the reality is the vast majority of what's going on can fall under good or evil. And as, you know, sort of reductive as that can sound, it's real, it's true. That is where most things lie. And so, you know, it's our belief and our intent and our actions to change this for kids. And so I think that that's one of the greatest things we've seen from this film. It's not the view count or anything like that. It's really the spur to action we've seen among adults to step up and do what they can to protect kids. And that comes in so many forms. You know, my wife's nonprofit, Freedom Forever, they put out a parenting revolution manual alongside the film for free. That manual gives people a starting place, because one of the number one questions we get from people is, okay, great, I understand these issues now. I want to do something. I'm activated. What do I do? Well, the manual starts you out with things you can do in your own community. And I think that's very important for people, that they do something. You know, if you look at our country, eagle eye view, and you look at all the problems, if you activate enough people to protect just their local area, and you say, don't worry about national, don't worry about global, because once you tell somebody, hey, you're part of saving the world, it all seems kind of too big. You know, who am I as an individual to save the world? But when you tell them, hey, just in your community, do this, this, and this, that's doable, right? But when you take that eagle eye view, if you activate people in every city, every county, every town in our country, that eagle eye view is going to look a whole lot like a fully protected country, because each individual area got protected by the people who live there.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's just so crucial and it's so important. And I know a lot of people get bent out of shape when you start saying like, well, there's a good party and there's an evil party. And so I try to think about like, what are we actually talking about when we talk about the left? You know, that can mean a lot of things. We all have a general idea. Sometimes I think folks spend a little bit too much time trying to understand how to define our terms instead of taking some action. But, you know, I've been in this business for a while. I got a PhD in political theory that I still like to use from time to time, drag it out, dust it off. So I think, you know, what's really going on with the left? How could such a thing get us to such a point without being, as you said, just kind of a full-blown evil, you know, force in the world? And I think what's going on is, you know, I think a lot of people, a lot of parents even, they've really been whipsawed by the past 25 years. They thought everything was going to be hearts and flowers and the world was going to turn into America. We were all going to live happily ever after. Nothing bad would ever happen again. Sent their kids to the best college they could get into. And what happened was not what was sold to us. It was not as advertised. And things really went off the rails in such a consistent way, crisis after crisis, really culminating with COVID and everything. I think an attitude set in, and the attitude was, look, we really have no choice. We've tried everything. Humanity still has its troubles. These are folks who are, you know, largely not turning to biblical faith or really to any faith. That's a traditional one for some answers. And so if you just look at the world that we've made and see all the ways that it has gone wrong and all those expectations that were set for us by our elites, you know, really haven't materialized. What kind of sensations do you have? What kind of feelings do you have? You have a feeling of like, well, we have to try something radically different. Incremental change isn't good enough. We gotta fundamentally alter the meaning of life and the human experience for the next generation. We gotta turn them into something that will somehow free them from all the flaws and foibles that we've seen in humanity so far. And I think, you know, that's a deep sort of suffering at the heart level. And if you don't have a sort of religion where there's a repentance or a forgiveness in there, it can send you to a very dark place, even though you're thinking like you're doing something where there really is no choice, and you've got to kind of transform your children into something that's utterly unlike anything that's come before. Does any of that track for you?
Well, everything about the time we live in is utterly unlike any time before. As much as we try to repeat history, there are things that are very different about the now we live in. I will start by saying this, though. What you said about parties, you know, it's tough for people when you say one party's good, one party's evil. It's tough for them because that's not really the truth. Yes, the left as a political operation and unit is evil, but we have Republicans on our side who are fully willing to sell out our country and allow mass illegal immigration where these people, many of them at least, come in, rape and murder and commit crimes in our country. And this is all preventable violence. We've got Republicans willing to sell out our children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren to fund endless wars across the world. So certainly, evil is not a territory occupied solely by the left. There's plenty of people on the right who are willing to sell out our future as well. And I would say that's incredibly evil. But when you look at, sort of the idea, what do we need to change for the future? And does it need to be radical? If I'm being perfectly candid, we do need to be radical in many different ways. Because the change our country has undergone has been radical. And so if you've had radical change taken to your country, you need radical change to bring it back to any semblance of sort of looking anything like what it did. And so I think the first thing I would say is let's start with incentives. America is broken because the incentives are broken. Incentives on every subject that's failing or every subject that people are upset about, they're all wrong. The incentives are all wrong. So let's look at illegal immigration. What incentive does somebody from another country have to not come here? Let's look at something like child predators. We see more and more cases of grooming, child molestation, these child sexual abuse videos that are traded online, the most ever. I mean, we just had an operation here in Tennessee that is announced this morning in this operation, they were able to come up with over 250,000 images of child sexual abuse. That's stunning in one operation in one state. Okay. 250,000. Okay. And they said they're still counting. That's just an initial sort of idea of what they've got. And they expect that number to grow. The incentives not to do that, what are they exactly? Because I know at least, 100 years ago, if a man was caught raping a child, he wouldn't be alive much longer. And that's why, we spearheaded here in Tennessee a law change. And it was a law change made to ensure that we challenge bad precedent at the Supreme Court. And that was to give the death penalty to child rapists. We need to allow that and give that tool over to justice so justice can hand out appropriate justice to somebody who's willing to violate a child like that. And so the reason why a lot of people don't realize you can't get the death penalty for raping a child is because of bad Supreme Court precedent. There was a case in the Supreme Court previously where they ruled you were not able to do this. And so we created these laws to challenge that precedent because I believe the Supreme Court of today has a makeup where they're going to do the sensible thing and affirm that you can, in fact, punish a heinous criminal like this with death instead of paying to keep them alive to the tune of millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the next step after that, fixing these incentives, is let's speed up the death penalty process. It is way too long and onerous. We spend way too much money on it. And, if we need to change sort of the evidentiary threshold so that we are sure that everybody on death row is somebody who committed the crime, that's fine. I'm okay with saying, okay, maybe we change the evidentiary threshold for receiving that as your punishment. But there's no doubt our incentives are wrong because I see people all the time getting off on bond, getting off with a couple months or a year or no prison time for having the sexual abuse of children on their devices or maybe even committing sexual abuse themselves against a child. That's insane. During COVID, we were letting child rapists out of prison. It's nuts. So no society can survive if their incentives are all wrong. And ours are all wrong. If you look as an illegal immigrant, I put myself in the position, let's pretend I'm, from El Salvador, okay? Maybe that's a bad country because they have a good president now. We'll say I'm from Mexico. I'm in Mexico and my family's poor. I'm watching TV. And I see during the last presidential debates, the entire Democratic Party, every single member who's running for president raised their hand to give me free health care. Then I see the Democratic cities are giving away gift cards and debit cards with money on them. I see I'm going to get free housing. I see that basically I'm going to have access to a bunch of things for free. Why would I not come if I'm struggling to survive in my country? Or if I'm just not happy and I want to go to America?
Yeah.
What is telling me, hey, there's consequences along the way? There is nothing. There's no negative incentive to tell them, hey, don't do this.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Not a good idea. All the incentives are on the side of coming.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say this not as an insult, but you sound like a politician. You talk about getting radicalized. You are not always in Tennessee. You are not always so deep into the political world. Tell us your story. How did you get or specifically, how did you get radicalized from where you were, 10 years ago to where you are today?
Well, Maybe I'm an anomaly in this sense, but I would say I was actually, if you were going to say I was radicalized, probably much earlier, because my family's from Cuba. So, communism, it's drilled into you as a child. If your family comes from that background, it's hard to have a bad day. There's a comedian who talks about this. He's on SNL now. I can't remember his name, but he's Cuban. And he makes this joke where he's like, you can't even have a bad day at school because you come home and your mom's like, how's your day? And if you say it was a bad day, she'd be like, oh, did somebody steal your freedom today? You have no freedom. And it's like, you can't really compete with that. So you're not allowed to have a bad day, And so, but you do learn, it's drilled into you. I mean, what communism does to a people, to your family, to your work, everything that a family works for, in my family's case, was stolen from them. And so it sort of radicalizes you in itself, the idea that somebody could work their whole life to create something, build something beautiful, a family home and a business that the whole family works in. It's really quintessential, the dream every person has. I won't even say American dream. I mean, it's a human dream to want to create and be together with your family and be able to survive together as a unit and support each other. And when that's stolen from your family, even if you weren't present for it, I mean, that at a cellular level affects you and definitely leans you toward ensuring that never happens again. Being a dad myself, we have 3 kids. My wife's pregnant with number 4 right now. I feel a moral duty to do everything I can to make sure that my kids never experience the same thing. And all the warning signs are there that we're on track to have them experience those same things here in America. And so what kind of man would I be? What kind of dad would I be? What kind of husband would I be if I just stood by, watched, and waited for it to happen and said, you know what, maybe I could insulate my kids from the effects of it. I have enough money or enough status or whatever it is to maybe insulate my kids from the effects of this. Maybe we move to another country, whatever. I'd be a horrible human being. Because there's a ton of people who don't have a voice, don't have the power, don't have the money, don't have the resources or ability to fight back against this. And so I think, there's a moral bound duty to do everything you can at any cost to make sure that your country doesn't fall into that type of, despotism or tyranny.
Well, I think that's very well said. And, there's also, if that's not enough for people, there's the kind of rationalist point of like, look, the battle for all the marbles is happening right here in the United States of America. And, even if you could kind of come up with some good excuses to pick up stakes and go somewhere else, it's only a matter of time and probably not that much time before before you run away from catches up with you. This is where the battle is going to be decided. And I think more and more people are aware of that. They are cognizant of that. We're not seeing massive outflows of people fleeing the United States of America, even though in some ways, certainly not in all, but in some ways it's become a weirder and darker place, this country, than it has been at a long time. And I got to say that from my standpoint, it is very helpful to see and inspiring to see people come from an artistic background, a creative background, and really get operationalized on these issues and realize that art and politics are not two different worlds, that they can't be held super apart from each other, and that if it's only nerds and intellectuals who are making decisions in our politics, over-credentialed, over-educated people, then we're probably going to get what we deserve. I think you're an example of that. Your wife, she's a creative person too. How was it for you leaving the sort of entertainment or arts industry, whatever you want to call it, and really striking out on your own?
Fantastic. The people in Hollywood, for the most part, are just detestable. I mean, if I'm being really honest, I got nominated for big awards and stuff like that. I never went to the award shows, which should tell you something. No matter whether I won or whether I was nominated or whatever, I never went. I didn't go to one of them. I didn't go to the VMAs. I didn't go to the MMVAs. I didn't go to any of this stuff, the Grammys, none of it, because I found the company detestable. I'd put it that way. It was a job for me. I was in love with film and I was in love with music. I was not in love with the people and I was not in love with the culture. And to be perfectly honest, I felt like in many ways, I was putting lipstick on a pig, trying to make something better than it was, to make it less offensive or less this or less that. And I bargained with myself. And that type of bargaining, I ended up realizing as I got older, was just, you bargaining with yourself to participate in things you don't agree with. And so, I felt like that's probably my largest moral failing in life, was that, I got sucked into that industry so young, and I didn't immediately have the courage to go, you know what, I'm going to do this my way, and I'm going to fight for always, just staying true to my values, what I believe in. And so, you learn to negotiate with power, and that means sometimes you film a scene you don't feel comfortable with or whatever. And, nothing crazy, but it still, it bothers you as a creative. But I think the larger point that I want to press in on that you said is art and politics. Too many people try to separate these things. They're not only intrinsically intertwined, they should be married. I argue they are married, because if you look at any great moment in political history, there's an art to it. Even moments you don't agree with, like, I couldn't stand Obama, but if you look at his election, it was filled with art. I mean, even his logo was like, it was plastered all over cities and graffitied in and stuff. Like, there was art in different forms with each campaign. There was the famous photo that guy did of him that got turned into art as well. And that was something that, shared all over the place. Art takes many different forms. During Trump's election, it was memes. There were these artistic memes and things like that really built up a group of people that had really not been engaged politically before. And so art is sort of engaged to every movement that happens politically. The question is whether you have the, fiber and creativity to engage in it and to be bold and kind of go out there and do it. And I think, the right as a whole has done a really poor job of that for a couple decades, and it's changing now. It's not just people like me. There's a lot of people out there that are changing it. And I think that landscape is something that could save not just the country, but the world.
Yeah, I think really it is. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Art really connects people on a different level, and that. It's different. I mean, it engages with every part of your life. Like my wife's song. My wife just had a song come out that, got up to number 3 on iTunes right away when it first came out, called Mama Bird. And the reason it is, popular out the gate with no label, no management, no promotion really or marketing, is because it just connects to people's normal lives. And that's what art does. If it connects on a soul level with what you do, you feel it. And so if you attach politics to that, something powerful can happen as a result. And so I think we're starting to understand and use that more in a way that the left has done very successfully for decades.
I think that's just so important. I think more people are starting to catch on. There's probably some kind of generational thing going on there, but I also want to be sure to talk about the business side of things, because I think that this is on people's minds a lot as well. You look at Hollywood, as you said, maybe not the best characters that you find out there, but once upon a time, you could rely on them, and I think a lot of Americans did, to crank out fairly entertaining films. And now you fast forward to 2024, films aren't so good. The bad character, the decadence, the depravity, the soul sickness of Hollywood has really been democratized. You don't have to go, to LA Basin in order to find it. It's setting up franchises in pretty much all the major American towns. Then the internet spreads it even further, and the whole industry is sort of in this crisis moment where they're not really sure how to make content that really connects in the kind of way that you're describing. Your wife's single does. I think in many ways they're too big to prevail, if I can put it that way. Where you're the head of Warner Brothers and you got completed movies that are in the can that people actually worked on, labored over, cared about. And you say, you know what, we're going to not put those movies out. We're going to take the loss because the tax advantages are better for us. I mean, this is really a sort of perversion of even the entertainment industry, which is saying something. And then you look over on the other side of the internet. You got social media influencers, TikTok stars, kind of that whole climate. I mean, look, a lot of that stuff isn't so hot. But even the people who are making relatively better content, it's a grind, and you can get burned out in a year or less, and maybe not even making those millions that you thought you would if you became the YouTuber or whatever. So we've got two poles. We got the old school legacy Hollywood model, and then we got that new school internet model. They're both failing. They're failing audiences. They're failing creators, and they're failing as businesses a lot of the time too. So what's the pipeline look like? What do you think is the path for creatives who love America, who are soul forward in their approach to artistry, have the chops, have been around, really committed to doing good work and connecting with that kind of audience? I mean, you put your film up on X, it's done really well. I saw Mama Bird working its way through X2, doing really well. Do you think that's the main channel? How do you think artists are going to be able to connect with those broad audiences and really scale up the best stuff that they have to offer?
Well, X is just terrific because, they're not going to take your film down. I mean, that's number one right off the bat is we've got to talk about censorship. The rest of the internet has all of these censorship loopholes. We can't put the film on YouTube. YouTube will pull it down. TikTok banned our ads. Instagram banned our ads. Facebook banned our ads. And we did, in all honesty, we tried to do our trailer as an ad at each one of these places, knowing that it was very likely they were going to deny them, because you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that if you do anything right of center, these places look for reasons to ban you. But then we did something that we kind of didn't expect, which were just, endorsement of the movie ads, where Elon Musk endorsed the movie, or, Tucker Carlson or whoever it was, and put those up as ads. Same thing. They denied those ads with nothing, that could be construed as, maybe adult or anything like that. So it's interesting, when you look at this landscape, you've got to look for where can you survive. That's step one. You can survive on X. Yeah. Number two, you've got to look at the long-term financial feasibility and growth possibilities of the platforms. And I see X is the most likely to explode because, number one, they want to work with creatives. So they've got a TV app coming out. They're willing to hear out your technical sort of complaints and try to fix them. That's huge. Everybody knows this is a creative. If you're working with a willing partner that wants to be better, that makes all the difference in the world. And then you look at sort of the monetary side of this. They're starting the monetization. They're doing a great job rolling it out. I do think obviously there's growing pains in monetization, and you're going to see some along the way. But I think if you look out and scale this, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the future, you're seeing only more opportunity. And so the ads you see at YouTube right now in video, I think you're going to see at X in fairly short time range. When you add that to the ads that are in the comments and the engageability of X versus YouTube, I think you're going to find that X becomes the platform of choice, especially as they cross into having a TV app, where if you're having professional creators and maybe open up the window to pay-per-view or to original content that is part of your X subscriber membership, then you're competing with Amazon Prime and these other places. I do think as you talk about the future of, just entertainment at large, you're going to see more of a fusion of the old system with the new system, because that's typically just historically how it goes in any industry. When there's sort of a new burgeoning thing, it sort of, finds a way to meld together with the old system. And so that means some of the new, some of the old comes together and usually creates the more successful model. The problem with Hollywood that, if you really want to put your finger on, like, why is Hollywood failing? Why can't they make entertaining movies anymore? It's very simple. Hollywood has always kind of operated under this 5 to 10% rule, where, like, you can offend your audience for about 5 to 10% of your movie, offend their sensibilities, offend their morality and their virtues, and so on and so forth. They'll kind of overlook it as long as it's done subtly. Once you cross that boundary, then people are no longer entertained and they're looking for reasons to hate your movie. And so Hollywood at large, the vast majority of movies coming out of it now have crossed that threshold. And so it's more like 20 to 50% of each movie has stuff inside of it that you find offensive to your values, your culture, your, sense of goodness, whatever it is. And as a byproduct of that, you distrust the system as a whole, and you say, hey, nobody should see this movie because they're this. In most cases, it's super woke. It's like, nobody's waiting around right now to see a black Peter Pan, but I'm sure they'll make one, probably a black transgender Peter Pan. That's just, that's how it is. That's a system that is broken, and it's going to continue to break until something new emerges and, molds to create a successful model. And I think we're on that path. I'll say, at least in the event of our movie, we considered it a massive success, both financially and in terms of, the public sort of support of the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's unquestionable that just seeing, I mean, it's almost as if they can't help themselves, at a certain point. If you cultivate and nurture and grow that kind of spiritual darkness inside of your heart, it starts leaking out, whether or not you're trying to hide it, or whether or not, if you keep it under 5%, you can get away with it. There's just, there's this temptation to just like manifest it more and more as it takes hold. And I think, you've seen that in Hollywood. And it's not just kind of that Harvey Weinstein, like Me Too moment. I'm sure you've seen Quiet on Set, the big documentary unveiling sort of pedophilia at Nickelodeon. I mean, some of the stories in there are just absolutely skin crawling, blood curdling stuff. And it does come out. You know, it might take a decade or 2 decades. What's going on with P. Diddy right now? You know, all kinds of issues, and even just going back to kind of the Jeffrey Epstein expanded universe. You know, we know that these networks have straddled the world and included some of the most powerful and prominent figures, certainly in the West. And it all kind of makes me wonder, you know, is Hollywood and that whole kind of darkness in the elite, is it really on borrowed time at this point? Is the mask finally starting to fall off, and are we finally going to kind of clean house?
The internet is the most dangerous thing to ever happen to the elite and to people in Hollywood included in that elite. You know, politics and Hollywood are much more similar than people realize. You know, I think that politics is basically Hollywood for ugly people, which has been said before, but I think it's true. And, you know, similar value sets, similar goals about power, money, status, you know, and all of those things come at a cost of selling out your own values, virtues, and belief systems, and melding to one that becomes sort of like this groupthink everybody has to believe in, because if they don't, well, you're thrown out of this system. And nobody wants to be thrown out, because that means you lose your money, your power, and your status. And so I do think it's on borrowed time, because the internet has invigorated the people, normal working class people, with the truth. And I think that's the most dangerous weapon to the elite, is the fact that normal people know what's going on. They understand. You can't call it a conspiracy theory anymore. You can't gaslight us. You can't pretend it's not happening. There's been enough of us who have seen that the system is corrupt, that have seen that the system is poison, to be able to tell the truth, that this is not a bedrock or a foundation that is worth building anything on, because it's poisoned, it's toxic. And so we have to create a new. And that's the thing that I drive home the point of the most, is that we have to create new ecosystems for entertainment, because what it's built on right now is not just unholy, it's not just dark, it's not just evil, but it's broken. It's broken because the trust is not there. The people know that what they've been sold is a lie. They know that there's just incredible evils that have been perpetrated upon kids, especially, but upon many different people. And if you look at that on a global scale, it's not just Hollywood, it's the elite as a whole. And they understand that the time is ticking, and that eventually, because of the advent of the internet and the truth being at people's fingertips, they are on borrowed time, and there is going to be a reckoning. And I do think that's why it makes it ever more likely that we will have some sort of blackout situation at some point when it comes to the internet, or continued push for censorship, like what we've seen recently in Australia, where they've tried to ban videos of things that the government finds to be, you know, a problem for them. That's going to be something we see more of from governments across the world. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a blackout at some point, strictly because this system is so threatened by the truth being at the fingertips of people on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a sort of inherent flaw or risk in the system, this technological system that we're building is, yeah, you kind of can just kind of hit the off button if you've got the right kind of clearances, the right kind of power. We've seen it happen in foreign countries. No reason theoretically that it can't happen here as well, although obviously, you know, all bets are off when that happens. But, you know, this goes to why I think you're one of the most fascinating guys out there right now, is usually if you want like a tech positive or a tech optimistic take, you got to look to technologists themselves. And a lot of those guys, you know, they got their podcasts and they got their rap, they got their story down. And sometimes it can all seem like a lot of hype and a lot of even like self-dealing, where they're like, yes, of course, you know, technology is going to save us all. And coincidentally, I'm a technologist, so, you know, like, keep the money coming. But that's not you. You know, you're coming from sort of former Hollywood world. You're a creative guy, artistic guy, family man, nothing to prove, no butts to kiss. And what you're saying is, look, Hollywood's on borrowed time because of technology, and creatives who are coming with heart and soul.
And I would argue I'm actually very much reluctant about certain technologies too. So I'm not the person you would think would be like, hey, technology is going to save us. But I do think that an open and free internet is the answer to bringing down a really evil system.
Yeah, well, you're anticipating my question here, which is, you know, you've shown us how tech can be great for creatives and how it can be bad for Hollywood. Obviously, there are risks. It falls into the wrong hands, bad government, major trouble. But I'm also curious, where do you think technology is at its most dangerous or complicated for artists? Sometimes people, they take a look at these AI-generated videos, and they seem like they've been hitting the amphetamines a little too hard, start getting excited. This is going to change everything. Artists can just like say some few words into their computer, and it'll make movies unlike anything we've ever seen before. Do you believe that hype? Do you think that that human artists do face some kind of inappropriate risk or threat from some of these technological advancements?
Yes and no. I mean, there's always going to be at least a large niche interest in human created art. Is it possible AI replaces a good number of artists? Absolutely. I think it's not just possible, I think it's probable. Not only is it probable there, but this is where my misgivings start. When it comes with AI that is smarter than human beings, when we get to that subject, you've got a lot of dangerous pitfalls, and I don't think any of them have been worked out. And I think you've got a government that is so hopelessly corrupt into politics, it refuses to ask the right people to come to the table to talk about what needs to happen. I mean, the Biden administration has boxed out Elon Musk from these conversations, despite the fact that he's one of the most well-connected and well-versed AI experts in the world, and has invested some of the most money in AI technology of anybody. And a lot of people don't even realize how far back that goes with him. And he has his own, set of concerns. And I think when you look at people like him or Jeffrey Hinton, who's considered one of the godfathers, and the predictions, certain people who are very, very well-versed. I mean, we're talking about the foundational architects of AI saying, hey, there's a decent chance, some saying 50-50, that within the next 15 to 20 years, AI not only is smarter than us, that's a foregone conclusion, that's happening momentarily, if not already, but that it will destroy us and that it will dominate us and choose to self-replicate and replace us. These are real concerns. This is not a movie anymore. We're not talking about the Terminator. We're talking about real life, real technology, real ability to build, real ability to replicate, real ability to create weapons, to make decisions about death. This is already happening among militaries in the world, where AI is making decisions about who dies on the battlefield. So these are sets of concerns that people need to start talking about and that we need to deal with if we do want to protect against those future threats, because threats against our kids are not just coming in the form of pharmaceuticals and their food, their water, these crazy sex-obsessed leftists who want to sexualize everything having to do with kids. It comes in many different forms. And AI is a threat to their futures. It's a threat to their sovereignty. It's a threat to many parts of their lives. I'm not saying ban AI. I think that's very wrong-headed in itself. AI is like any other tool. It can be used to be a fantastic boon for humans. It can make us more productive. It can do all kinds of great things, but it can also be a weapon that destroys us. And the question is, are we responsible enough at a time where we're showing probably that we're not? Are we responsible enough to do what needs to be done to ensure that it is going to end up erring on the side of good and not the side of evil?
Yeah, important questions. I mean, I've been banging away at some of this stuff for a couple of years now, and so a little bit I can start to see people starting to come around. I've had those concerns for a long time. I have new concerns now though too, which is there's almost this self-fulfilling prophecy aspect involved, where even people who are right on the issue and sort of understand what the real nature of the threat is, and the bad scenario, and how easy it would be to slip into that. Sometimes that can cultivate an attitude, especially among people who have spent all their lives in that sort of world of intellectual politics, where they say, well, you know what, I'm sorry, but we just don't have time. We don't have the luxury to make good art anymore. We don't have time to make feature films or TV series where, it's really getting into what it means to be alive in this time and sort of exploring our human challenges and our human condition. And we have to put all of our energy into sort of fighting the Borg and, taking the fight to the bad guys. And, maybe one day after we win the war, after we win that Butlerian jihad for all you Dune people out there, then maybe, we can go back to having the luxury of making art again. I don't like the sound of that. I think at least some of us still have to be out there really doing what the great filmmakers and what the great novelists and what the great visual artists have done over the centuries, over millennia, which is to cause people to have that kind of confrontation with with the nature of our human being, and it's the ultimate questions about who we are and why we're here, participating in that sort of reckoning. Otherwise, I think we're in danger of getting trapped between feeling like we have to choose between sort of crying over what once was in the past and crying over what might be again in the future. Do you think that's right? And do you see enough artists out there in your own life where you feel like we're not going to forget how to make real art that moves people during this fight?
We'll never forget. We'll never forget. I will say the people you described sound like failed artists, and I've heard them before. I've heard them a million times. At the start of every technological shift, you hear these people. I remember back when I started my company. One of the reasons my company was very successful and landed a lot of contracts in Hollywood was because we were undergoing this change from film to digital, and we were slashing the costs that it was to create a production as a byproduct of not using film. My company, we didn't use film. We said, throw it out the window. We're going all digital. And you had all these other competing companies going, we can't compete with that. That's what they're doing. They're not even making money. And we were making money. They just were kind of an old, slow dinosaur. And so you can get caught in any sort of time period as the dinosaur who doesn't understand the new thing. And as dangerous as AI is, as artists, you have to be honest with yourself. You are blessed to live in a time like this. You have more tools at your disposal right now as an artist, more available to you as well than any human being ever has in history. So if you're making an excuse about why you can't make a movie, why you can't make a commercial, why you can't make a painting or whatever, you're just making excuses, okay? You can literally make a watchable product with your phone now, okay? And I know as a director who shoots on fancy cameras and stuff, nobody wants to hear that from me, but it's true. You can shoot something. In fact, I have shot something with my phone. I shot one of my favorite music videos I've ever shot. I shot with my phone with my wife in our backyard, and it will always be one of my favorite videos. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful, beautiful video, and even the color is rich. It's beautiful, and so you can't make excuses. You can make beautiful art with so many tools now, and anybody telling you otherwise is just making excuses for why they can't make beautiful art.
I like that. That's a good answer. I'm going to twist it a little bit, though. Just go back to the business side of things. It's natural for humans to want to have it all, I guess, or at least in this fallen state that we're in. But that yearning to just have the complete package with you're doing the art, you have the vision, you have the soul, but you're also making enough to live off of. And I think a lot of people are sort of worried, you got failed artists sort of over here, but then on the other side, you have the people who are like the wannabes. They say, man, I'd do it, I'd think about it, I'd take that risk, I'd really be disciplined, but I just don't think I can make any money doing it. I mean, what do you tell those people? Do you think that we're going to be able to reconstruct a kind of creative economy where, yes, there's the distribution, yes, there's the content, yes, it's coming from the right place, culturally and from the hearts of artists, but it's also like a viable economic space that people can build lives, build families around.
There's no surefire success model in entertainment, and anybody telling you otherwise is a liar. And so the truth is complicated, because this is sort of the perpetual damaged state of the artist, right? I mean, throughout human history, it sort of almost becomes a meme that artists have trouble feeding themselves, and it's true because it's a devaluing of what artists do. And so I appreciate that, and it sucks, and I get it. But the truth is, there's always been a subset of artists who were able to break through to commercial success, and were able to make it their living. And so my first sort of thought is that risk-averse people will never make it. That's first off the bat, unless you're from, a nepotism situation where you're like families from Hollywood and you just had an in right away. If you're risk-averse, you're probably done for, and I would not pursue the arts. If you're willing to take risks, you have to understand that risks are called risks because they are a risk. You're not even necessarily a bad artist if you don't make it. That's one thing that people get wrong. I've seen some incredible people not make it, and it's through no fault of their own. So there's certainly truth to the judgment that being good is not good enough. And that's very true. There's all types of other stuff that goes along with it. Are you good at a subset of other things? Because the truth is, the reason I've done well in art is because I'm also really good at business. And so that's why I have a bunch of, other investment things and stuff that me and my wife do, because I'm business minded on top of being a creative. And so nowadays, with the advent of the internet, are you a good marketer? Because if you're not, if you can't market yourself or market your product, it doesn't matter how wonderful it is. In the modern age we live in, you're not selling anything, which means you're not making money. And if you're not making money, you can't feed your family. And so there's other tools outside of being a great artist that are needed to be developed in young people who want to be successful artists. So, teach your kid who's interested in art about marketing. Teach them about ensuring that you grow an audience of people that are, really interested in that specific type of art that you're doing, and that's something that I think is going to become as valuable of a skill set to a filmmaker as it is, paintbrushes to painters. You've got to know how to sell your movie to an audience. And I do think the future is filmmakers having their own audiences. And you do see some of that cult of personality type of stuff with some old time directors, you'll see it with like Scorsese. There's Scorsese people who just love Scorsese movies. There's people who love Tim Burton movies, or Chris Nolan. I'm one of those people. I love Chris Nolan movies. And so, the future Christopher Nolans or Scorsese's or whatever, I think are going to be people who understand that, creating a personality around your brand and things like that are important to the success of your project. So if you care about the art, you kind of go outside the bounds of your comfortability, because for most artists, I think it is kind of uncomfortable being on this side of the camera. I know it certainly is for me, but it's necessary. If you want the success of your project to be able to feed your family and things like that, you've got to be comfortable doing the other side of it, which means doing some work and making sure that you put in the time and effort to make sure that side's a success as well.
All right, got to have that skin in the game to take that risk. I'll got one more for you here, and that is this. You're in Tennessee, you've seen LA, I'm sure you get around the country. Geographically, where do you think the Renaissance points are? I mean, you probably think pretty well of Tennessee since you're still there. Are there any others that we should keep on our radar?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm the most biased pro-Tennessee person possible. So, I will say there is something incredibly special happening in Tennessee. The types of people who are moving here it's amazing. And, one thing that I've found very unique about Tennessee is that some incredible people move here and they go, I don't know what it was. I just felt led to Tennessee. I don't have family here. I don't have friends. And I had never even been here before. And something was telling me I was supposed to go to Tennessee. I can't tell you the number of people I've heard that from. And my wife and I, we had visited Tennessee a bunch before we moved here about 6 years ago. We moved here. And before that, we had both been here for work quite a bit. So we knew we loved Tennessee already. But for those people I see coming in now, there really is something happening where I do think there's a sifting occurring right now. And there's no question there's sort of a national migration pattern that's been happening for the past 4, 5, 6 years where people are moving where they're politically aligned in ways that I don't think we have in the past as Americans. And I think that's only going to continue and only going to harden. And you're going to have hyper blue states, hyper red states, and very few, if any, purple states. And so I think that we're seeing that stuff sort of ideologically occur where people are self-selecting where they want to be around people who are like-minded. And so I would say I would broaden it out, the question. I would broaden it out to what is the future of our country going to look like? And, where are people going to be? And where is this reckoning going to occur? And I really do think it looks like almost like two different sets of countries. I think, there's some truth to the idea that states' rights matter. And I think that that's going to become something that both sides really latch onto, because I think that the more they self-select, citizens, that is, self-select into different states or territories because they want the politics of that state or territory, the more they're going to realize the sovereignty of that territory or state is more and more important because they want to ensure that they have those belief systems without federal intervention. And so I think that's going to become sort of one of the big movement predictors of tomorrow, is that I think both sides are going to veer toward being opposed to federal government intervention, at least when it comes to the voters. The politicians will never be for that, especially at the federal level. But I think voters are going to be more and more interested in policies that disengage from the federal and say, hey, my state has control over this. You outside, because say you're a Democrat, super far left. Okay, let's say you're a communist in California. Okay, not far apart from a Democrat, but let's say you're a full bore commie, and you want abortion of babies on the table while the mom's giving birth. Well, their prospect in their mind is going to be, well, we have to make sure the federal government can't stop us if Trump is in office. And I think if you're on my side of the political aisle, you're going to be thinking, how do we ensure the federal government is not able to, force vaccinate our kids or be able to, come and confiscate our guns? Well, it's ensuring that we enshrine states' rights. And I think there's a lot of technical legalese in the middle there for why our position is correct and theirs is not, and you can get into the semantics of it, but the semantics don't really matter as long as the reality is that people veer into that territory of sort of lifting up states' rights as a byproduct of trying to just sort of preserve their own sense and identity of what they believe in politically.
Robby Starbuck, Renaissance man. I will be staying tuned, and I encourage everyone else to do so as well. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, that's all we got. Till next time around. If you're watching on YouTube, give us that like, smash the subscribe, comment. Let me know, who would you like me to interview next? Until that time, this is Zero Hour. I'm James Poulos. May God have mercy on us all.